Hey guys, it's Patria here, your friend that's also a lawyer. If you're watching this series, it means that you want to learn a little bit more about the law and you want to learn some tips and tricks for buying a property. It doesn't matter if this is your first property or if it's an investment, this series will have something for everyone. But today I wanted to talk about KiwiSaver. Alrighty, so what is KiwiSaver? Well, hopefully you know all about it. KiwiSaver basically is a scheme that the government brought in, which allows us to save some of our money that we earn over the time that we're employed into a separate account that we're not allowed to access until either we're 65 or we're buying our first house. Now, there are some circumstances where you can take that KiwiSaver out when you don't fit into one of those two categories. The first one is you are suffering hardship. Now, if you need to get your KiwiSaver out for hardship, you need to fill out some forms. Those forms are going to ask for proof that you are suffering hardship and that you actually need your KiwiSaver in order to survive. Now, the bar is really high, unfortunately, but as long as you're prepared to provide evidence and fill out a lot of forms, then you can certainly make an application to get your KiwiSaver out on hardship grounds. The second one is where we're looking at getting our KiwiSaver for a second chance. Now, this is where someone might have already had their first property, but they didn't use their KiwiSaver on their first property. And so they're looking at wanting to use it for their second property. There are some requirements that you need to meet. And the biggest one is that you're still in the position of a first home buyer. So this is not intended for someone who's buying their second home and is actually in a really tidy financial spot, or someone who's using the equity from their first home to bounce off to buy their second home. This is really intended for someone who, although they are buying their second home, they are in the same position financially as a first home buyer. And yeah, you need to be able to prove that. So in order to make an application to get a second chance withdrawal, you'll need to go to this website. Once you're at this website, you can then find all of the forms which you can fill in. Now, you don't need your solicitor in order to do this. You can do all of this all by yourself and you'll get a letter which confirms your eligibility for a second chance withdrawal, and that is what you take along to your solicitor. But what about first home withdrawals? What about when you want to take your KiwiSaver out for that exciting first home purchase? Wow, it's actually a pretty easy process. Now, there are two situations in terms of taking your KiwiSaver out for that first home. The first one is you're taking KiwiSaver out to fund your deposit. Now, deposit is a little bit of a confusing word. Even though it feels like it shouldn't be, the reality is it can be kind of confusing at times because there are two types of deposits. The first one is you need to have a deposit you pay to the vendor, and this is how much money you're going to put down as a confirmation that you're definitely buying this house. It's like having a little bit of skin in the game and proving that you are 100% committed to buying this property. Typically speaking, we see the deposits being paid once you are unconditional. So once you've satisfied all your conditions and all we're doing is now waiting for settlement. Now, the other time that the word deposit is used is by the bank, where the bank says, I want to see that you have a deposit available in order for us to fund the rest of your property purchase. These are two different things, but they didn't used to be. So the reason that there used to be this use of the word deposit with the bank is because what the bank used to say is, if you can pay the deposit, we'll pay the rest. And industry standard deposits are 10%. But these days, the banks are now saying they're not prepared to lend 90%. So even if you have that 10% ready to pay the vendor, they want to see that you have another 10% of the property value in order to add to this. And then they'll fund the last 80%. So the deposit that you need for the vendor might not be the same as the deposit that you need for the bank. Even though the deposit that you pay to the vendor will make up a portion of the deposit you have for your bank, the deposit that you have in your bank account is very likely to be a little bit bigger. So if you've got a little bit of savings, but you also need to bump that up with KiwiSaver in order to pay your deposit for the vendor, then that means we need to get your KiwiSaver out in order to fund your deposit. If though you have savings, but not quite enough to satisfy the bank that you've got their deposit, so for example, you might have 12%. This means that you're able to take that 10% worth and pay that to the vendor when you go unconditional, and now you've paid their deposit. But the bank wants to see that you have the rest to make up that 20% deposit that they want. They're going to use that 10% that you've just paid to the vendor to go towards this, but perhaps you need to make up that last little bit with your KiwiSaver. This means that you actually need your KiwiSaver on settlement. And the reason for that is because you're going to add your KiwiSaver to the money that your bank is giving you, and then we're going to pay that over to the vendor, and that will pay for the property itself. But why am I telling you this, and does it really matter? Well, the answer is it's all to do with timing. KiwiSaver can take 10 to 15 working days to actually get released from your KiwiSaver provider. And how does that work? Well, you need to fill out a form, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. So let's pretend that we're with ASB. It doesn't really matter which bank you're with if you're with a bank. There are obviously some smaller and more independent KiwiSaver providers, but for the sake of this video, if you're with a bank, it doesn't matter which bank you're with, you can simply Google, for example, ASB KiwiSaver scheme. Once you've done this, it should come up with some documentation, and that will be the KiwiSaver first home withdrawal form. Now, if you are with someone like Generate or some other sort of smaller, more independent KiwiSaver provider, either you can Google it and get their form from their website, or if you have a login, you'll need to log in, and then from your dashboard, you should be able to download the form itself. Now, let me show you what a form looks like. You'll see here that you have all of your personal information, such as your name, your KiwiSaver provider number, and other key information about you. What will help you save a little bit of money on legal fees is filling out this form before you go to see your solicitor. But just remember, it takes 10 to 15 working days for that KiwiSaver to be released. So if you need KiwiSaver to fund your deposit once you go unconditional, i.e. the deposit for the vendor, you need to make sure that you're doing this straight away as soon as your offer is accepted. So fill out that form, phone your solicitor, and let them know that you need to sign your KiwiSaver withdrawal form. What you then need to do is get that form ready and take it with you to see your solicitor. I recommend that you actually print this out and have the physical form with you. Now, every provider is different, but every provider does need to verify your identity. So what I recommend you do is take a copy of preferably your passport with you. Now, if you don't have a passport, you can also take a copy of your driver's license, but that means you'll also need some secondary form of ID. The best thing you can do to make sure you're going to meet all these requirements is take the form, take your proof of address, and your proof of ID. This way your solicitor is not chasing you up asking for these things, and you've turned up ready to go. Just like I said in my last video, the less time your solicitor needs to spend on your matter, the less money they're going to charge you. So if you turn up ready to go and your solicitor doesn't need to constantly chase you for things, then you've just saved yourself a little bit of money. When you're with your solicitor, you'll then need to actually sign the form in front of them. So make sure you don't sign the form at home before you go. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and then they're going to ask you to confirm that the information is correct, and then you'll sign. But what do? Well, they fill out these pages on the form. So they're going to fill out all the information about who you're buying it off, when we need the money, and what they're going to do when they have the money. Now, they need to make some undertakings, and that is a solicitor's promise to your KiwiSaver provider. And that is things like confirming they're only going to use the money towards the purchase of the property, and if for any reason the purchase of the property doesn't go ahead, they're going to return the money to your KiwiSaver. This is because your KiwiSaver provider is really concerned about making sure that your investment is safe. So while they're happy for you to take your money and invest it in a property, if for some reason that property purchase doesn't go ahead, they don't want to see you losing that money, so they want to have it back. Now, the KiwiSaver money is going to go to your solicitor directly, and then your solicitor is going to pay it. What you can't do is get money from some other source and then pay that while you're waiting for your KiwiSaver to arrive, and then when your KiwiSaver arrives, pay yourself back. Your solicitor is not allowed to do this, and this is a very big no-no. You can't do that because KiwiSaver must be used only for paying for the property. So that's why we need to be really careful with timeframes. If you're looking at using your KiwiSaver money to actually go towards the deposit you're paying the vendor, make sure you fill out the form straight away. If for some reason you are unable to fill out the form, or maybe it was a last minute thing, just tell your solicitor so that they can tell the vendor that this is what's happening. Straight away when you make the application, some KiwiSaver providers are fabulous and they'll send you confirmation that you meet all the requirements and we're just waiting for the money to be processed. If that's the case, you might feel a little bit more confident about going unconditional, even though you don't actually have money in your account yet. Now, in terms of settlement, it's the same thing. Make sure that you go and sign these forms with your solicitor once you've gone unconditional, even if settlement is a while away. We just want to make sure we've got plenty of time for things to go wrong. We want to make sure that the money gets deposited into your solicitor's account in plenty of time to settlement. I've had plenty of absolute nightmares where someone has come to me at the very last minute and said, oh yeah, by the way, that $60,000 shortfall, I'm just funding that with my KiwiSaver. And don't worry, KiwiSaver's already confirmed I can use it. Uh-oh, that's a real red flag, because what that tells me is that although KiwiSaver said you can use your money, you haven't actually made an application with me. So make sure you tell your solicitor straight away. In that situation, I had to ask KiwiSaver very, very nicely if they would consider withdrawing the money a little bit early. And to be honest with you, they weren't able to do that. And so although they did release the money way earlier than they usually would, my client was left in a position where he wasn't able to settle, and we had to settle a few days late. Now, this all happened because I had absolutely no idea that my client was using KiwiSaver, and my client thought he didn't need to tell me. So what does that tell you? You need to make sure you tell your solicitor what your intentions are. And in this situation, even though I'd asked, they thought that they didn't need to tell me because they thought that they could just sort it all out by themselves, which is great, but it doesn't always work out that way. So make sure if you're doing absolutely anything to do with the purchase of your property, especially with funding it, you tell your solicitor straight away. Once your KiwiSaver has been withdrawn, you'll see on your KiwiSaver balance that it shows that it's been withdrawn for a first time, and then we can't touch it again until you're 65, or you suffer some sort of hardship and you need to pull it out on hardship grounds. Anyway, I hope that this has demystified this part of the process a little bit, and that you are going to go into buying a property with a little bit more knowledge and feeling a little bit more like you understand the process. Make sure you keep an eye on my channel, because I'll be dropping loads more videos just like this one to try and explain the process in even more detail. Anyway, until next time, my friends, see you later. Bye.